Brazilian feminist movements gathered in the rally Marcha das Margaridas as the rally celebrates 23rd years of its first edition, accompanied by this time by the President Lula. The armed forces of Ukraine have attacked the village of Kursenovich, located in the Russian province of Briansk. And the Ministry of Defense of Niger confirmed that 17 members of its armed forces were killed in a terrorist attack. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the south. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, in these are the news. The Brazilian President, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, participates in the Marcha das Margaridas, a feminist demonstration that celebrates 23 years since its first rally. In Brazil, the head of state and more than 100,000 women gathered for the 7th Marcha das Margaridas. This rally takes place every 4 years, and this 2023 it goes under the slogan, the reconstruction of Brazil and good living. During this type of activities, people seek to democratize the access to land, advocate for the protection of nature with environmental and climate justice, and public education. The event is coordinated by the National Confederation of Agricultural Workers, federations, and affiliated unions. Delegations from 35 countries, ministers, and representatives of official banks took part in the opening ceremony. And we stay in Brazil, where the rural women's rally Marcha das Margaridas continues in Brasilia. Our correspondent, Brian Muir, brings us the details.
An estimated crowd of around 100,000 came out onto the streets of Brazil's capital, Brasilia, today for the 7th March of the Margaridas. It's a women's march sponsored by the National Rural Workers Union Federation, who bussed in tens of thousands of rural working women from all 26 Brazilian states. The demands of the march this year were dualfold. First, they want the government to pay more attention to the Bem Viver, or good living movement, which involves agroecology, like more sponsorship for organic foods and elimination of pesticides and things like that. And also they're demanding that the government reinstate all of the laws and policies that were eliminated after the 2006 coup against Dilma Rousseff, in favor of big extractivist industries, mining, logging, and soy and beef cultivation, often in parts of deforested former rainforests. Now, at the end of the march, a group of over 20 national politicians took the stage, including President Lula himself, thanking them and promising to do what they can to ensure that their objectives are reached in the current Lula government.
And in Brazil, the leader of the Landless Rural Workers Movement, MST, João Pedro Stetil, on Tuesday defended the struggle for agrarian reform while attacking the most conservative sectors of agribusiness in his country. Before the Parliamentary Commission on Inquiry, CPI, in the Chamber of Deputies, the also Brazilian economists highlighted the collective sense, the collegiate decision-making, the division of tasks, and the intellectual formation of the movement's militants. Stetil thanked the expressions of solidarity with the movement and highlighted the importance of the National Agrarian Reform Education Program. Stetil criticized the division in agribusiness between those who support President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and the Brazilian Association of Soybean Producers, which he said only thinks about making money.
There is a concept in the penal code, which is in the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court of Justice: invasion of land or any public property. And when someone does this for their own benefit, it is characterized as squatting, and it is criminalized by the penal code. With regard to this action, I repeat that here in Brazil, it is common for people with money to invade indigenous land, quilombola land, and public land. That's invasion. Now, what our movement is doing, recognized by case law, is not invasion, but occupation. And occupation here is not squatting. I'm not the one saying that. It is the case law of the Superior Court of Justice. Because the families who go there to occupy an area, wherever it may be, are not going there for their own benefit. They go there to protest, to draw the government's attention so that the government applies the law.
And the Argentine government has renewed the standing price agreements in force with wholesale marketing chains, large hypermarket chains, and mass consumer manufacturers. The items included in this agreement will go up 5% each month for the next 3 months until October. The agreement also includes tax relief measures, that is, tax reductions, with which the government intends to compensate the companies affected by the new value of the dollar, which this Monday, after the results of the primary elections, shot up to 22%. This is one of the latest measures to curb year-on-year inflation, currently standing at 114%, and to cope with possible economic destabilization ahead of presidential elections in October 22nd. On Tuesday in Ecuador, the President Guillermo Lasso and the police commanders were denounced for the murder of the presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio. According to Edison Carrillo, the lawyer and candidate to the National Assembly for the Amigo movement, there was willful omission in the murder that occurred on August the 9th in the midst of a wave of escalating violence in Ecuador. Carrillo, who has been coordinator of commerce of Quito and used in his account of the social network Twitter renamed X, labels such as crime of state and assassination detailed at the ethics of the courts the nature of the judicial proceeding.
I have come to present a complaint for fraudulent omission against the President of the Republic as representative of the executive, as well as against the Minister of the Interior and his representative, Lieutenant Colonel Zapata.
Carrillo also pointed out to the police operation, questioning why one of the main suspects, who was shot 9 times, did not receive immediate medical attention.
Each one of the police officers who were in charge of protecting the life of Fernando Villavicencio, not only Fernando Villavicencio, but also those who were in the meeting. Remember that there are 9 people injured. Let's remember that there is a suspect who was shot, and instead of taking him to a health center, what they did was to take him to a police facilities, where we were told that he had died. A person with 9 shocks was not taken to the hospital. These things, they will have to be explained.
On Tuesday, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights reported a 19% reduction of murders of social leaders in Colombia. The head of state and the UN office in Colombia, Juliet de Rivero, issued the report on Tuesday, acknowledging the positive impact of the policies implemented by the administration of Gustavo Petro in the matter. The document analyzes the situation after the reforms of the government between January the 1st and June 20th of the current year. Alongside the representatives of the executive, foreign governments, and social and political leaders, de Rivero focused on the security guarantee policies of the government, but also addressed the increase in massacres and the targeted defenders victims of violence. And the United Nations Office for Human Rights in Colombia has positively recognized the progress and the commitments of the Colombian government in this area.
I present an analysis of human rights situation of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Colombia. On the one hand, this office celebrates the human rights approach of this government. It opens to the human rights approach and is committed to the guarantee of human rights, which has resulted in several important reforms and positive impacts. In the number of verified cases of homicide of human rights defenders compared to the previous semester from July to December 2022. This is positive, but the number of defenders murdered in Colombia continues to be absolutely intolerable. 29 men, 7 women, 11 indigenous, 9 Afro-descendants, and 15 peasants.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Guatemala, less than a week before the presidential elections to be held on Sunday 20th, the highest electoral body confirmed that 68% of the boxes with the voting material have already been shipped. The Communications Office of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal confirmed that in addition to national distribution, the material has also been sent to the United States for voting abroad. They have also reported that supplies to the polling stations has been distributed in all the departments except in the metropolitan area. David de Leon, a spokesperson for the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, indicated they have set a deadline for the delivery of all the voting material for the 19th of August. On Wednesday, Mexico's Interior Ministry celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Montevideo Consensus on Population and Development, the most progressive intergovernmental agreement approved in the region to date. The National Population Council organized a session led by Alejandro Encinas, the Undersecretary of Human Rights, Population and Migration. The attendees highlighted the integral approach and dialogue on rethinking governmental social policies. Undersecretary Encinas insisted that there is still much to be done and recognized that it is important to endorse the commitment of the agreement. The Mexican activists recalled the importance of the agreement for women. And now we move on to other topics. In the United States, Hawaii local authorities have raised to 106 the number of people who have died in the fires in the island of Maui, while hundreds of people are still missing. The data have been updated by the Maui Police Department, where several fires have devastated part of the island during the last week and where the U.S. government has moved to a forensic team to strengthen and advance in the work of identifying the victims caused by the fire. The official death toll, according to the latest count by local authorities, has risen to 106, but it is likely that the figure will increase as search and rescue tasks continue. U.S. President Joe Biden announced Tuesday that he will travel to Hawaii as soon as possible to assess the damage caused by the fires on the island of Maui. 25 countries that are home to a quarter of the world's population are facing extreme water stress, according to a new research by the World Resources Institute. The report suggests that these countries regularly use 80% of their water reserves each year. The Institute's Aqueduct Water Risk Map reveals that water demand is increasing around the world and that more than doubled since 1960. The study found that while water demand has stabilized in Europe and the U.S., it is soaring in Africa, and that by 2050, worldwide demand is projected to increase by 15%. Among the 25, the most water-stressed countries are Saudi Arabia, Chile, San Marino, Belgium, and Greece. The 5 most water-stressed are Bahrain, Cyprus, Kuwait, Lebanon, and Oman. On Tuesday, at least 3 people have died when a light aircraft crashed in the Loire-Atlantique department in northwestern France. The French Office of Research and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety reported the crash of a light aircraft in Levallois-sur-Loire in the northwest of the country. The authority confirmed 3 people were traveling in the tourist plane. Firefighters found the wreckage of the aircraft in the sea at a depth of several meters. The rescue operation was interrupted as night approached due to weather conditions. Among the dead was a known French journalist, Gerard Leclerc, who worked for CNews and other media. French authorities have opened an investigation into the incident. In other topics, the armed forces of Ukraine have attacked the village of Kursanovichi, located in the Russian province of Briansk. On Wednesday, the provincial governor, Alexander Bogumas, informed that there were no fatalities nor wounded after the attack. Bogumas confirmed damage to the structures of 5 residential buildings, a school, and an entertainment venue. Briansk is located 380 kilometers southwest of Moscow, Russia's capital city. And TeleSUR English launches its own videos on demand site for you to go and revisit or interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings, and more. Just go to the top left corner in our website homepage and click on the video option to access our VOD platform. And now we will have a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Defense of Niger confirmed that 17 members of its armed forces were killed in a terrorist attack. On Tuesday, the event occurred in the region of Tilaberi in the west of the nation at around 13:30 local time. The military office also reported that 20 other soldiers were wounded. The report noted that the quick reaction of the air and ground forces mitigated the severity of the terrorist assault, estimating that at least 100 of the attackers have been neutralized. The authorities have indicated that the death toll is provisional, since among the 20 or so wounded, there are 6 who are in serious condition. On Tuesday, the struggle in Sudan entered its 4th month and thousands of people have died. Since Sudan's conflict erupted on April 15th, the country has been plunged into a dire humanitarian crisis. In a joint appeal, the heads of 20 global organizations pointed out that more than 6 million Sudanese people are one step away from famine and that the situation is spiraling out of control. In addition, they also said that more than 14 million children need humanitarian aid and over 4 million people have fled the fighting either within the war-ravaged country or as refugees to neighboring states. Meanwhile, the country has seen increasing risks of large-scale outbreaks of infectious diseases such as malaria, dengue fever, and cholera. On Wednesday, the United Nations Stabilization Mission in Mali denounced an attack against one of its convoys. According to the UN officials, one of its convoys was violently attacked in Mekene in the northeast of the nation. The multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission known as MINUSMA said there was no damage or fatalities, only 2 soldiers lightly wounded, and rejected the violent action, stressing that acts like this can constitute a war crime. The attacks come in the midst of high tension in the region with threats of military interventions and other aggressive movements. And several Palestinians were injured on Wednesday when Israeli occupation forces stormed the Balata refugee camp east of Nablus in the West Bank. Wafa news agency denounced that occupation forces closed the entrances to the camp and raided in large numbers among shots and poison gas bombs, injuring 10 Palestinians and also leaving more than 80 people suffering from tear gas inhalation. Earlier, Israeli soldiers fired tear gas canisters at locals in the eastern part of the city, where they were providing cover for Israeli settlers who had broken into Joseph's tomb, a shrine located in an area controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Increased Israeli incursions into the occupied West Bank have fueled violence, with around 200 Palestinians killed there in 2023. And we stay in the same topic. The Israeli occupying forces are holding some 170 Palestinian minors in their prisons, where they are subjected to torture and cruel and degrading treatment. The Commission for Prisoners and Ex-Prisoners Affairs denounced it and pointed out that in the penitentiary centers of Ofer, Megiddo, and Demon, they lack all the minimum necessities of life and human integrity. The systematic violations committed against them in those prisons are unprecedented, as more than 3/4 of the imprisoned minors have been subjected to some type of physical attack and all suffered psychological torture. According to official figures, since the year 2000, more than 17,000 minors have been illegally detained. On Tuesday, Libyan authorities highlighted that the Special Deterrence Forces and the 444th Brigade reached an agreement to end the hostilities with the mediation of the Prime Minister of the Libyan Unity, Abdul Hamid Dibeibe. After heavy clashes that left at least 27 dead and 75 wounded on Tuesday, in addition to the evacuation of civilians, the militias and the army unit agreed on a truce. In the meantime, local media also confirmed the delivery of the commander of the 444th Combat Brigade, Mahmoud Hamza, who had been detained on Monday by the Special Deterrence Forces. In this sense, the official communiqué assured Commander Mahmoud Hamza is in the custody of its own unit and all troops have returned to their barracks. And as the Taliban government celebrates its second year since a return to power, Afghan women around the world announced the launch of a campaign to demand the current ruler to restore the right to secondary and university education for girls and young women in the country. In this sense, United Nations on Wednesday called for guaranteed rights for women and girls in Afghanistan, where, according to the UN, the gap between the Taliban's promises and practices is widening. Since coming into power in Afghanistan 2 years ago, the Taliban have barred more than 1.1 million young Afghan women from access to secondary and higher education. Also, many of them escaped to other nations to study and train. In all cases, the Afghan diaspora demands equal rights for women and girls back in their homeland to ensure their development and fulfillment. And we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.